I know why your prayers are not being answered. As I was doing my devotions this morning, it became very clear to me that we are misfocused as Christians. Now, I, like you, I pray, but not as much as I should. Now, thank the Lord, the last several weeks, I've been increasing my prayers like they need to be, and my conscience is bothering me a whole lot less, and I'm actually on the positive side of things. But like you, not all of my prayers have been answered. And some of them, though I've been praying for them for 20, 25, and 30 years, some of those prayers have just not been answered. And it occurred to me today why, at least in part, that is. Now let's think about this for a second. As we are living our lives, and let me state that again, as we live our lives, how many of us are living life exactly and precisely as God called us to? Now, I'm not talking about perfection. I'm just talking about following of the Spirit. As Christians, do we not struggle? Okay, we absolutely struggle. Now, if we are not actually following God precisely like we should, then if we're not following God, then we're living our life. Now, so as we live our life, we have our understanding, our notions of what fulfillment are, our projections of what fulfillment and beauty and perfection would look like. So think about this. As you're thinking about what to pray for, and then some things, they conjure up themselves that this has to be prayed for. But as we think about what to pray for, we're like, well, how could life be better? And we begin to think about prayer requests that need to be answered. Like, oh yeah, my neighbor across the street needs to be saved. And so we start praying, dear God, would you save my neighbor across the street? Or, man, my parents aren't saved. Now, I need to pray that my parents will receive Christ into their life. And in our mind, we begin to elevate the prayer request that it would be so wonderful if this was answered. Things would be perfect if this was answered. This would be fulfillment if this was answered. And if you follow me, slowly we begin to build in our minds this concept that prayer or an answered prayer would be a pinnacle moment of fulfillment and joy. And then we start seeing in our eyes, like if we could pray and have all of our prayers answered, then we would be full of joy. This is what would fill us up. We would be so excited if these prayers were answered. And there betrays our problem and why they're not getting answered. We have elevated prayers being answered and fulfilled to the point where that becomes satisfaction over God being our satisfaction. Going back to, are you living your life or are you living God's life as He's called you to live? You see, most of the time, in most circumstances, in the lives of Christians, since there's more immature than mature, and since we're immature most of the time and maturing, farther and as we get older, hopefully. But for the most part, we're living our life instead of following after God. And since we're not following after God, we don't know what fulfillment really is. Like, leave prayer aside for a minute. What if we just followed after God? And if we were following after God, we would know Him and we would be full of Him and we could feel Him and we would know that He is the pinnacle of joy and happiness. And maybe we wouldn't be so idolizing of what our prayer requests are and how much they might fulfill us. God, I would be so fulfilled if you'd just wipe out all of my debts. That would be fulfillment to me. And that is so meager as compared with God. In fact, as I thought upon this more, I was like, how do we know it's not just more fulfilling to have a lot of our prayers not answered? I know that sounds really strange, but how do we know it's not more fulfilling to not have our prayers answered instead of us trying to craft the joy and happiness of life, how do we know it's not just more fulfilling to be experiencing who God is as master and allowing him to provide the things and the circumstances and the prayers that we need to be praying? It just became very clear to me as I'm sharing with you that we have lifted up and exalted our prayers even to a status point they don't need to be at. Yeah, let's pray about things. Let's be diligent. Let's fast over these things. But don't let us ever assume wrongfully that answered prayers would be anywhere as close to fulfilling as actually knowing God deeply and personally.